Hi, Marissa.
Hi there. Hi, Yin. Thank you for
Hi.
having me today.
Thank you for joining and welcome to the Twigo University interview series. So thank you for joining the show.
I'm excited, and I love what Twigo's doing in the world for women and all professionals, really.
Absolutely. And so before we get into your fabulous book of Own Your Authority, which there's so many amazing gems in here, and I can't wait to dive deeper into it. But would you mind sharing first for our listeners just more about your background and start from there?
Sure. Well, I am excuse me, I'm a former IT executive. I grew up pretty much on Wall Street for about 20 years. I was a woman in tech and was leading global data warehouse enterprise projects. Was pretty much in that industry for a long time. And then after recognized from many people and feedback that I also mentioned in my book, feedback being the critical principle of advancing in your career, that I should maybe move in another direction, doing coaching and training, because I was empowering a lot of people behind the scenes. And long story short, moved into leadership training and coaching, which is where I am now. And the book is very much based on that journey and many other people, I worked with.
Love it. And so, as you mentioned, you're working kind of coaching and really mentoring a lot of people. What prompted you to write the book? And really, I mean, it's a lot of work to author one, but what inspired you to actually write it down?
Oh, well, that's a good question. The book is actually based on years of the coaching program that I've been running and the online course that we had launched. So it's actually the system that I've been working through for years. It's actually my own personal system that I grew up with myself and implementing as a woman. And then it just kept refining and refining until, one day someone asked me to do a TED Talk, which I did with Speaking Without Apology, which is one of the chapters. And then after the TED Talk, I got a book deal from McGraw-Hill. So I really didn't set out to write the book. They sort of, reached out and it went from there. So it was just a culmination of what I was already doing.
I love that. I love how serendipity just kind of makes you an author now as well as a coach.
Yeah.
And so one quote is Gordon Treadgold, who is one of the most influential people in the field of HR, said that your book was, quote, extraordinary and the missing piece for many, where it teaches the leadership mindset needed and how you leverage your skills to fulfill that potential and become the leader you were meant to be. Yeah. Wow. I thought that was so powerful. So if we were to unpack Gordon's quote about the book, can you share, first off, what is a leadership mindset to you?
Leadership mindset really starts with self-leadership. It doesn't require, definition is manager one-to-one, leadership one-to-many. But my definition of leadership is self-leadership and being aware, very much aware of how you're being perceived and how you relate to others. So if you're aware of that in any area, not just career, as a parent, as a partner, finances, health, once you have that self-awareness, that's really where you can move into other spaces, being vulnerable, making decisions, taking risks. So that's really where I start in terms of leadership mindset.
I love that. And so you start the book with talking about self-promotion. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, so self-promotion is something that I know, especially for women. I'll be, perfectly transparent. The book was really has a backdrop of women professionals, because that was really where I started in terms of the work I was doing. But self-promotion is something that I found many women were not doing, myself included. And what I recognized for myself, and I never would survive that industry, it's such an abrasive industry for many reasons, right? For men, male-dominated, very abrasive, being in tech, several points. I found that, self-promotion was not a negative thing. It was selling yourself, and not just yourself, really, not to be, narcissistic about it, but really selling your team and your results, right? You go into a meeting and your whole team has worked, 3 weekends in a row to get something out, and nobody's mentioning it, or everyone's sort of packaging it up with a nice big red bow and saying it's just done. That's not really going to be impactful to the, your results and to also the credit that's due. So self-promotion is very much leaning into that in terms of being yourself, not selling yourself, and recognizing that if you're not doing it, especially going back to self-leadership, right? If you're not owning that, then why would you expect other people to own into you? And so it's this, it's this beautiful love affair, if you think of it that way. It's really a non-negotiable. to advance.
Love that. It reminds me a bit also of the work that Susan Cain did in her book Quiet, and talked about how, specifically looking at introverts and women, that women don't self-promote as much as their male colleagues. And so the idea is to be aware of it and then also address it in the same way. So it's not, to your point, it's not about ego and being narcissistic. It's about promoting all the good things. There's one section I loved. It was the next section that talked about owning your authority, and really the book's title, but you mentioned that experts are made, not born. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm glad you picked that up, because I wanted to really stress that. Sometimes you say more with less. And that for me is recognizing that if you work for a company or you work for yourself, you're an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur. Either way, you have clients. And I don't believe women who work for organizations, and I apologize, it's not just for women. This book is for men and women, but again, the backdrop. I don't believe that professionals really walk into their work every day and say, I'm an expert, I'm a professional expert. That's just not something that comes out of your head. And so I really wanted to hone that in, because you have to consider yourself as an entrepreneur or entrepreneur. You have clients, you have expertise, and that's getting swept under the rug. And the other objection, which we often say, and this book was really about answering the objections, answering why I'm not good enough, why I don't have value. And so I don't believe, even if someone says, they're an expert, that they actually are owning that. And so if the next question is, yes, Marisa, I am an expert, but I don't believe I'm being perceived that way or really give a lot of value, then my answer to that through the book is, well, then let's hold up the mirror and recognize what you have brought to the table. And that brings up imposter syndrome and all types of other things. But again, you have to really own, as a foundation level, if you were building a house, this is your value. You are an expert. You bring a lot of things to the table, soft skills, expertise, skill sets, and you have to own it so that you can communicate it, project it, and self-promote it.
Love that. I was going to say, I'm writing all this stuff down really fast, but then I realized, it's all in your book. So students, don't worry, it's all in the book, and you don't have to write down the notes so quickly. One section that I absolutely loved and really resonated with me is the third section that talks about, there's a saying that I've been sharing with other people, that is, your network is your net worth. And I fully believe that your ecosystem, who you have either personally or professionally in your ecosystem, really matter. And so you have a section about fearlessly networking. Can you talk about that and how that's so critical and really important, whether male or female or introverts, but why that's so critical?
Yeah, well, that's for the most part, for the professionals I work with, myself included, once upon a time, I believe there's a lot of fear and resistance to networking, and yet it's the number one thing that can really move the needle in your career. And so I talk a lot about, I devoted a whole chapter around that. I tried to relate it to almost a sales point of view. If you've ever been in sales, you have a pipeline, you have clients. I tried to bring that in, again, that entrepreneurial mindset, because I think that most people don't take action until they really need to take action. And I mentioned that, the no action actions. And so I don't believe, again, people walk up, professionals wake up in the middle of the day or in the morning and say, hey, I should go networking today. Like, it's just not a top of mind. So that chapter is really to bring home that it is part of your strategy, and it's something that you want to think about before you need your network, not when you need it, because then you're sort of scrambling and you're like under pressure. So it's cultivating relationships. And if you can do that on the friendship side, outside of work, you can do that at work. And for myself personally, every opportunity I got, including even growing my business and resigning from corporate, was strictly on networking. And I consider myself an extroverted introvert. I'm not a social butterfly. I don't wake up to meet 10 people every day. It was a struggle, but that book was devoted to those type of professionals who I consider myself as well.
I love it. We have a lot in common. I think I'm an extrovert introvert also, because I work with a lot of people and I communicate a lot, but people just assume I'm an extrovert. But by definition, I'm actually an introvert. So that resonates with me. One section as a transition to that, we also have in common is that we are children of immigrants, and my parents came over from Vietnam. But you had a section in the yes exclamation point, the power of that word, and to ask and expect it every time, which I love. One section in it talks about think like an immigrant, but if you can share with people who are listening what the yes or the power of yes means, what you meant by that section, and also the specific part of think like an immigrant.
Yes. appropriately. Well, first of all, I really fundamentally believe that in any area of your life, whether you're looking to find a new partner or looking to lose 50 pounds, you got to kind of work around every day and just be affirming about what you can create. Ask for a miracle every day. Assume people are going to give you the yes in a meeting, whatever that might be. That's really what that chapter was about. I think a lot of us also, tend to, myself included, I used to walk around going into a meeting or a conversation thinking, oh, they're going to say no. Oh, if you've already put that out there, that energy, well, you know what, you're creating that, right? You're going to get the no. And so you're sort of responsible for the outcome of the results that you create. That's what the chapter was about. But the Think Like an Immigrant, I have to say, I was a little hesitant of putting that in there because I certainly didn't want to insult anybody. I'm a product of an immigrant family. And so I feel like that was a big influence on me because I learned to be desensitized to asking. And so I put a couple of stories from my parents. They, we're a Sicilian family. And I just saw so many examples of them, just knocking on doors, asking people for favors and not worrying about whether they say no or being uncomfortable about it. And if you apply that to your career, it's a numbers game. That's what immigrants do well. It's a numbers game. They don't care if they get rejected for a job. They're going to keep on moving on. They're like Teflon, and they're very resilient. And so I think that when you have that type of mindset, you just sort of desensitized to it. You're like, who cares? There's plenty of other opportunities around the corner.
Oh, I love that. I'm so glad you included it. And I took it as a completely positive thing. I'm biased, but I thought it was a wonderful chapter. And one line that I absolutely loved is, you become what you believe. And so simple, so powerful, very kind of the American dream, right? You make your own, create your own destiny. So I absolutely love that. And maybe that's a perfect transition to the next section, which is speaking without apology, which, we talked about this in the impact of women and how a lot of women and colleagues think about or speak a different way than how they believe. So if you could talk a little bit more about speaking without apology, because I think that's so important.
Yes. Speaking without apology is something that kept coming up. It came from the root source of that was seeing, women consistently apologizing before they moved into while they were talking or making a phone call, myself included. And I just realized, what if we just removed certain words out of our speech? How would we show up? And when I did that for myself, I felt like a whole new person. My back straightened up. I was getting meetings for clients I never got, getting the yes. And so it really physically made emotionally, but physically also made a big difference. So that chapter is, I guess you say, more of a technical chapter. I did a TED talk on it. It's more about recognizing the little speech qualifiers that we weave into our everyday speech that are diluting our value. And if you remove them, such as, I'm just calling, to see if you had a status, or I'm just wondering if we can meet, like just the word just is automatically putting you in a subservient position where you're inconveniencing someone when actually you're at the same, level at the table with someone. So I wanted to make people aware of that. And I have to say, everyone who's either read that chapter or attended Speaking Without Apology talk has shared with me that once they're aware of that language on email or verbal, they will never do it again. It's like, once you know, you can't not know. And that's the self-awareness, right? Being aware of your dialogue.
Love that. And it really is, it's the power of the words, where one person recommended to me to speak as if I'm writing. And not many people will write, oh, I'm just writing this down. No, take out the words. Words matter. And it's the power of being succinct and concise. And so I fully agree with that, and wish I would have learned that earlier in my 20s and 30s. But that kind of goes to your last section about intuition and honing that. Can you share your thoughts there of how to sharpen it, how to trust it, and how to allow it, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I put that chapter in because when I launched, into coaching and training, I led with the Gutsy Leadership Platform. And that truly is, leading with your gut, leading with that sixth sense. So that chapter is all about recognizing that there are instinctual thoughts that come out of nowhere. And if you don't act on them immediately, and I say in that chapter, within 17 seconds, that's sort of the universal principle. If you don't act, there's an energy frequency around that thought. Well, you will get supported. Well, you will get the yes. If you don't act on that thought instinctually, you will talk yourself out of job opportunities. You will walk out of meetings thinking that you should have said this, should have said that. It's agreeing to disagree or dropping a bomb in a meeting. It's just instinctually acting on the thoughts. Thoughts are energy. And so I talk about trusting it by following the 17-second rule, recognizing past decisions you've made when you didn't follow your gut, and just trusting yourself. And so that chapter is really about self-trust. We talked about self-awareness, but that chapter was about self-trust, which is completely tied to following your gut instinct.
Love that. So helpful. I mean, it's a really like life manifesto and life hack to read this book and apply these principles, which I'm looking forward to doing more of. For people who are wondering, okay, I've read the book, I think it's wonderful, I agree with all the things, and this would help me level up, but I just can't continue to do it or do it consistently. What advice do you have for whether it's students or professionals just to continue and maintain it? Do you recommend a group setting, a coaching setting, or how do you recommend people continue with a lot of these principles that you wrote about?
Well, the first thing I recommend, and it's not overnight, I certainly don't want everyone to, drink from the fire hose after reading. It's a handbook. You can pick any chapter. It doesn't even have to be in order. The first thing I really recommend, and I don't recall if I put this in the book, but I know I coach on it often, is waking up and being intentional to at least 3 things a day where you're getting outside of your comfort zone, whatever that might be. If you could just pick a spot anywhere in the book or what comes to you instinctually, and just wake up every morning being willing to be uncomfortable, comfortable being uncomfortable. I promise that will become a daily habit where, you'll look back. If you do 3 things a day, five days a week, you'll have 15 gutsy moves that you've made. And just by reflecting and celebrating yourself for that, I talk about compliments in chapter 1, celebrating and giving yourself compliments as well. I guarantee it'll work like a muscle. Like you can ride a bike at 10 and not again until you're 50. Your body doesn't need to remember. It will just kick in, muscle memory, right? So that's like the fast path to really getting into the habit, but you have to start and be aware of your no action actions, which is doing nothing.
Love that. So helpful. And I feel like we could talk for hours and just have so much more advice. But let's keep it short. And maybe one last question. As the students and alumni involved with the Twigo Foundation listen to this, and talk about kind of the fast version of this, but what is one key takeaway that you would share for leaders as they navigate ahead in this volatile period in business and markets and war in life, but ahead in 2022 and maybe beyond, but one key takeaway to share?
Yeah, I would say right now we are hungry for connection, the human connection. And I think that in the stress and chaos that we've been in the middle of, these last 2 years, people, you react to, it's understandable. But, one thing is when you're in the eye of the storm, there's calm, there's not chaos. And so I would say for all leaders, no matter what level, recognize that the human connection is probably your most powerful tool that you have in your hip pocket. If you're starting off work on a Monday, for example, rather than talking shop and jumping into work mode, ask about people's, lives, weekends, show an interest. I know that was always important before, but now more than ever, people really want to feel valued and appreciated and that you care. And I don't think you can really put a price on that. People really need that. I know I need that as well, like we all do. So I think that's not something you wake up every day thinking of, but definitely what I would say for everybody.
Brilliant reminder. Thank you. And where can listeners find out more about you and your work, your coaching, and your book?
Well, you can find out about the book is on all platforms. It's also an audiobook on all platforms. Audible, Google, Apple, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. As far as my work, my website, inourshoes.com, that's In Our Shoes is sort of where we started with the Gutsy Leadership Movement. And that would be the best. And lots of bonus resources associated. If you love speaking without apology, I have 101 ways to communicate confidently on the site and lots of other resources. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining Twigo U's interview series. This was super helpful for me in a very condensed 20 minutes, but super helpful. And I highly recommend people pick up the book, Own Your Authority. Thank you, Marisa.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah.